So next, we're going to transition and we're going to hear from Elizabeth Sweet. Elizabeth, I believe you are with us here. Yes, come on over. We'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your group and your work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elliot. Hi, folks. My name is Elizabeth Sweet. My Korean name is Chonheo. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm currently calling in from land of the Jamestown S'Klallam people in the Pacific Northwest. And my role is that I'm the community engagement manager and director of what's called NAAPIEN, which is a lived mental health experience network for the National Asian American Pacific Islander Mental Health Association, or NAPIMA. Big mouthful there, but we go by the shortened acronym of NAPIMA. And, I'm here today to do a little bit of talking about our work specifically at NAPIMHA, which is, specific to the AA and HPI community, as well as, sharing a little bit of what we strongly believe at NAPIMHA is amplifying lived experience voices, honoring, that is central to, what we bring to the work as people. My own experiences are particularly that of being a queer, neurodivergent, transracial Korean American adoptee who was raised in a very rural, predominantly white community. And so I can certainly speak to what it feels like to be in isolation, right? And the impact on mental health, particularly as a person of color, and my youth and teen years. I also know what it feels like, though, to eventually find community that is deeply affirmative of all aspects of identity, that sees you as an intersectional whole person, recognizes your humanity, and that it's entirely possible to find that, even if that journey is long and ongoing. And so that's a little about me, but in terms of the work that we do at NAPIMA, and specifically as it relates to uplifting 2S LGBTQIA plus folks and communities, is that for us as an organization, yes, we're a nonprofit. We're deeply committed as a national advocacy nonprofit to promoting and redefining mental health and wellness for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities across the country. We do this through a number of things, including training programs, community mental health programs, policy and advocacy, and as mentioned, really always centering that lived experience piece. We really want to believe and craft this world intentionally in which, mental health is destigmatized, particularly as a topic for communities of color, for ANHPI communities, and, ensure that, we can access care and, be our most well selves and our whole selves in our identity. So that's something that we're deeply passionate about. So another kind of tenet of our work that we often promote at NAPIMA is this idea that we're committed to the idea that, quote unquote, this too is mental health, meaning that we deeply recognize and we always talk about mental health as, you can't speak about, the importance of mental health without advocating for all the linked issue areas that are fundamentally tied to mental health. So that includes, civic health, environmental justice, bodily autonomy, racial justice, immigrant rights, and the safety of 2S LGBTQIA plus folks. And so that's all we see that as deeply in this ecosystem of being intrinsically tied to well-being. And so we don't separate that at all. We see it all as one. And so in terms of our specific work, we'll say that connected through the Center of Excellence on LGBTQ plus behavioral health, as we were selected as an Affirm Pro training site. So that's a affirmative training for professionals. And we specifically, are offering this training, but with the addition that we have adapted that curriculum to include cultural considerations for Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, acknowledging that's not often included. That's often our communities and our cultural backgrounds and identities are often invisibilized within, these conversations and those kind of trainings. And so we really asserted, in our rollout and implementation, of this specific Affirm Pro training that we were, really emphasizing those cultural pieces. And so for us, that includes doing things like really just acknowledging that, queer and trans ANHPI people and identities have always existed. They always will. If we think about, how ancient and pre-colonial these identities are, we can point to the Hijra of South Asia, the Kathoey of Thailand, the Wakashu in the Edo period of Japan, the Babaylan in the pre-colonial Philippines as, revered spiritual leaders. And then across Pacifica culture, there's so many amazing identities to highlight, particularly, in Samoan culture, the Fafine, the Mahu of Hawaii, and, and other Pacifica folks. And so I think that, just that acknowledgement and holding that intrinsically, as a lineage and an ancestry for those of us who are ANHPI is very important and something we emphasize a lot. But we also, at the same time, as we've been doing this training, we're also aware of, current realities, right? As you all are, we're not afraid to balance our discussions within the training of acknowledging the very nuanced potential challenges, particularly for, if you think about AAPI immigrants, displaced Native Hawaiians who may be, forced onto the mainland and, the experiences, right, around the stress of experiencing homo and transphobia alongside, the pieces of racial discrimination, othering, and marginalization, and how even our communities at times have internalized that, right? And can often be themselves the ones that perpetuate maybe forms of shame around their LGBTQI plus identities or among their children or families, right? And that is often speaking to the pressures of assimilation and concerns around like safety and self-preservation. So I think we hold those two things in duality at all times and really want to honor that those things are both of realities for folks and at work. But all this to say, as we've been doing this Affirm Pro training, I think it's been a really powerful form of programming for us. It's an area in which we, are deeply striving to push back against this, like I mentioned, the kind of the hyper invisibility of, ANHPIs who are LGBTQIA plus, that deep, like, intersectional place that often is diminished or not always seen, and wanting to honor that. I think I'll share a quote now from, author, speaker, poet, Ocean Vuong, who's a Vietnamese American who framed queerness in a really beautiful way. In 2024, I believe, they said that, being queer saved my life. Often we see queerness as deprivation, but when I look at my life, I saw that queerness demanded an alternative innovation from me. And I think that's a really amazing quote. I love their work as well. If you haven't read some of their poetry, their writing, I think it's deeply poignant and a great read for anyone. And so with that, I think, I'd really like to just end my time by encouraging all folks here who might be listening, that it's really deeply important, to take up space, particularly if you are, an LGBTQI plus person of color, if you're ANHPI, know that you're not alone, and know that like all dimensions of your identity are deeply, invaluable and deserve to exist in harmony. They don't deserve to be severed apart. It can often be hard to show up as all parts of yourself, but it truly is the most important thing you can do. And I believe we're dropping a link in the chat right now. It includes what we, during that mentioned Affirm Pro training that we offer. We have what we call a community garden that we offer our participants during that. I have a public version of that for you all. It's some research that we at NAAPIMHA have done that includes things like a list of LGBTQIA plus ANHPI organizations, would have left some that are really amazing. There are partners in the space, including the National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance, or NAAPIA, Desi Rainbow, Utopia Washington, which is the United Territories of Pacific Islanders Alliance in Washington State. They are a queer and trans-led PI org, amazing work that they do, and as well as Lavender Phoenix. So a couple others on that list as well, including some additional information and resources that are specific, to the cultural context of our communities. But yeah, I appreciate the chance to speak today, to be in community with you all, and would hope that that resource document maybe finds its way around and folks find it useful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Elizabeth, before you go, I just wanted to see if you could tell us, what do you do for joy? What do you do to create some fun in your life when you're not working? What are the things that you do to go to that fill your cup back up?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I think, yes, we cannot pour, from empty cups. We cannot serve and lead and, do all that without, restoring ourselves. And so for me, that takes the form particularly of, building off of what was said with the previous speaker too, like for myself as a Korean adoptee, cultural reclamation and reconnection is really powerful and important. So I'm someone who actually really loves to upcycle and wear Korean hanbok, which is traditional Korean dress. I think that it's, a really great thing to just, to wear, to decolonize, my own sense of being on Turtle Island now instead of my homeland of Korea. And then also I'm someone who deeply loves the outdoors, maybe no surprise being raised in the Northwest. So anytime to kind of, touch grass, connect, especially with land and water. I think water has always been a big part of my life. So anytime I can get out to a lake, a river, at the ocean, always appreciate that. Love to be on the beach and just, yeah, take that in.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you for sharing. Thanks for being here today. Got some shout outs from love from Angela Weeks as well. Just glad to see y'all doing the work that you're doing with the firm. So thanks for joining us. I'll let you go and we'll see you later. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Take care, folks.